tough competitor. He'll do anything he can to win, and that's what happens. He wins. And that's our ethic in the West. Win, baby, win. Win at all costs. But I like a few beautiful losers. And I think this can give people a lot of thought. Righteousness, perfect righteousness, pure foods, purity regime, absolute sincerity, straightness, no moving to the lighter way, no tempering doctrines, no games. That's what I mean a modern Christian can get their teeth into, plus they're not infected by Jew hatred.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed your talk. I just wanted to ask if you had a little more explanation of James's role as the leader of the community.
Wow, boy, that's a long one. I wrote a whole book about that.
Yeah, I know.
I'll just read you some chapters, and I'll try to pick up 1 or 2 points from it. In the early part of the book, we have some of the following chapters. James's succession and the election to fill Judas Iscariot's office. The election of James in early church tradition. James's Rechabitism and Nazaritism. James's vegetarianism, abstention from blood, consuming no wine. James's bathing and clothing habits, etc., etc., etc. There's an awful lot of information, totally unculled, totally unpresented to anybody. But all I can tell you is the Pseudo-Clementines portray him as this totally righteous person who everyone was petrified of. They all were shaking with fear when he would walk in because he was so, not ferocious, but so overpowering. And that's why I say we can get a real good picture of James as leader and as the bishop of the early community, the bishop of Jerusalem, and the bishop of bishops of all the communities. In the 40s and 50s, there really were no other communities but Jerusalem. The others were just seed bedding in other places. The bishop of Jerusalem was the bishop of bishops. James, the leader of Christianity everywhere. And Paul acknowledges that. When James comes, when the messengers of James comes down, he says in Galatians, everyone stopped eating with Gentiles. Now, I know we want to eat with Gentiles, but the pure foods people wouldn't because they were polluted by idols, it was considered, and fornication and lots of other things. And then Paul at that point calls Peter a hypocrite. He says, Peter, I know you used to not do this all the time, but when those from James came down, you stopped keeping table fellowships and you followed them in this hypocrisy. And then Paul says, I'm going to go to the Gentiles, and you're not having any more part of any of this. So it's quite clear that Peter defers to James even in Paul's letters. And the representatives of James command everything. And we may not agree with their point of view, but that's because we see it through a Pauline perspective. I believe that from their own times, they were being as righteous as they know how to be. And the picture of James's leadership is very widespread. Now, if you add to this, it's in the Nag Hammadi text, it's in the Gospel of Thomas, it's in the Apocalypses of James in the Nag Hammadi text, it's in Jerome. By the way, I forgot to tell you, Jerome is the one who finally decided that the brothers were cousins, not brothers. Do you know how he decided that? He found a little reference in the Gospel of John that Mary had a sister called Mary. What? Yeah, I kid you not, it's there. She's called Mary, the sister of the mother of the Lord. Only the mother of the Lord isn't called Mary, her sister is called Mary. Wow, that's a good one. And she's the wife of Clopas. She has a husband called Clopas, and her sons are James, Jude, Simon, and Joses. So then he said, that is the mother of the other brothers, Mary, the sister of her sister Mary. I kid you not. And that is how we now get that Jesus' brothers are not brothers, they're cousins. And that's in the 4th century. It is total nonsense. It is preposterous, but it points up a problem. Wherever the brothers and family of Jesus come into play in the scripture, all of this dissimulation comes into effect. And as I told you before, I think, sometimes I forget what I've already said, but I think I said this. Brothers become cousins. Yeah, I did tell you that. Fathers become uncles. Mothers turn into their own sisters. And in fact, I think Jesus is the brother called Joses. And the reason he's called a brother of Jesus and Joses, you know, in Greek and are basically the same word. It's basically the same, you see. And we don't know anything about we know all about Simon, we know all about Judas, we know all about James, we don't know anything about Joses. So basically I think Jesus turned into his own brother as this disinformation went on, and all these people were marginalized and distanced from the Son of God. And the reason was that in the 2nd century, the doctrine of the supernatural Christ gained momentum, and Jesus became the only begotten Son of God. I can show you how this worked, for instance, when the dove comes down in the John the Baptist episode. But it's too complicated to tell you. I can only tell you that it was changed from the psalm, "This is my son, at this moment have I begotten him," how it appears in the apocryphal Gospels, to "This is my only begotten son, in him I am well pleased," which is not in the Psalms. And with that little shift, we get an actual Son of God from an adoptionist Son of God. And the Son of God is in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but what is it there and everywhere else? It is becoming perfectly righteous. As you become perfectly righteous, you become like unto a Son of God. And baptism is the last stage because you purifies your body. But I mean, this is very complicated, and it's a great question. I just probably don't have the mentality, the fatigue, or the wherewithal to answer it at the moment, but I urge you to read further in this stuff and see what you come up with.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? There's one or two more, and then we'll let you guys go to sleep, and me too. Yeah.
Thank you for your studies. They're very enlightening, but they cause other questions.
I hope so.
And maybe some not directly or obviously directly related to all of the deceptions that you're talking about. Why is it that the Middle East is the axle of misery that we all rotate around?
That's an historical question. You know, we're all the creatures of history. And, you know, this is where our literature evolved from. Unfortunately, maybe it would be better if we had Eskimo culture, or the Bantu people of Africa, or the Aboriginals of Australia. It would be probably healthier. In fact, Native American culture is probably healthier than a lot of things we've heard about. But we are creatures of our civilization to a certain extent. And this literature started in around the 10th century BC and reached a crescendo in the time of the Scrolls and the New Testament. And unfortunately or fortunately, this is what we're heirs to. Now, if this has got some problems, and all I want to do, I'm not advocating, I just want to sort it out. I may, in fact, prefer Native American religion, dolphins, fishing, any kind of food or whatever, or enlightenment from looking at the sun on the surf. I may rather have that. This is our heritage, but I like the intellectual challenge, which I mean about getting your teeth into something, of sorting this out. This is what modern, educated, sophisticated people want to do. This is how you can go to bed at night and